So now we have created our regression test baseline, you might say. Our scenario continues with a requirement to modify both the ALJO COB stroke ALJO sub C program combination to address this technical debt, as well as to address and improve the code coverage for our unit tests. So if I return back to my Topaz workbench environment, the first thing I need to do is to modify my program. So I go to Host Explorer, go to my program code, find where my program code resides. There is my program. And I'm going to address the technical debt which we found for ALJO COB, whereby I need to replace my stop run statement with a go back. So open up my program, find stop run, there's my stop run statement, replace it with a go back, save that. Now recompile it. That's my compile job. Submit it. You have the return from my compile. Maximum return code 4, so that's fine. The next part of my requirement was to change the code coverage and improve it. If we go back to my sonar cube analysis, take a look at the code coverage. Now let's take a look at the ALJO sub C code coverage. I look at the detailed annotated report on my code. I go down. The first thing I can see is that I have no tests being performed to cover the criteria where emp type equals M. I'm covering emp type equals S, but for management data, emp type equals M, I'm doing nothing. So I need to modify my unit test definition to include additional test cases to cover this type of data. So if I return back to my workbench environment, I can now take a look at ALJO sub C test scenario. Open that up. You can see that all my test cases, highlight those, they're all type S. So to improve my code coverage, I can duplicate one of those, give it a different name. Now for my input data, I will change my emp type to M. I will change the sales amount. I also need to set up my check conditions to cover this unit test. Conditions, again, change that to M, change that to 100,000, and change that to 2,000. Now that's what I'm expecting based on my program documentation. Obviously, if this doesn't come up with 200,000, it means I've got another program problem. And this is all part of my regression test requirement. So at this point, I can save that away. Now I need to get that modified unit test back up into my GitHub repository. So if I highlight my local repository, which covers my project for my TTT unit test, go to Git staging view. Here I can see I have my change highlighted, ready for staging. I'll simply click on the double cross icon to stage that, give my push a message, changed to include a Optional test case to improve code coverage. In this case, I'm simply going to do a commit and push into my GitHub repository. And we can see that's been moved up. Just as a final check, I'll go into my GitHub repository, refresh the view, and there you can see it's now moved and pushed that up successfully to my GitHub repository. So, having done that, having made the changes to my program, and made the changes to my unit test, I can now return to my pipeline and rerun that pipeline to run the regression test against my code and see if it has produced what I require. Build that. We've checked out the unit tests that we saved into GitHub, rechecking out my source code and my copybook code, running the first of my unit tests, and this one for ALJO cob, which hasn't been modified. Now running the unit test for ALJO sub C, which has been modified to improve the code coverage. Retrieve the code coverage information, and now running the sonar cube analysis again. So the first thing we see from our run is that there's been no instability flagged up for our TTT unit tests. This generally indicates that there has been a success percentage output for both of these TT unit tests of 100%. So the regression aspect of our unit test has flagged up that nothing has changed in terms of how our program is running, how it's producing its output. So that's a good unit test result for both of our programs. So now let's take a look at our sonar cube results. Now we've improved the code coverage immediately. It was around 67, it's now 69. So if I go in here and take a look at my sub C code coverage, the value is improved to 66.7%. Take a look at the details. You can immediately see that I'm now covering at least part of the testing requirement for management type data. Now if we return back to the main page for my analysis, you will also see that my critical issues have been reduced from 2 to 1. So now the go back has been addressed, and I only have technical debt for this next sentence issue. So we have demonstrated how we can use the Git repository to store our unit tests, check them out into a Jenkins pipeline definition, run those unit tests to create a baseline, and how you can create modifications to your existing stored TTT unit tests within Topaz Workbench, load those modifications into your GitHub or Bitbucket remote repositories, and make them available automatically for your Jenkins pipeline regression-based testing. This concludes this demo. Thank you very much for your time.